They say when someone is in danger, you'll hear it. The scream, the crash, the cry for help. But what if there is no scream? What if the moment comes, the violence erupts, and the world stays silent? That's what makes this story so terrifying. Because in the final moments of her life, Elena Ward didn't have the chance to cry out. She was silenced. And that silence, heavy, suffocating, unbroken, is what lingers. Behind every photo of her smiling face, behind every memory her family clings to, lies the unbearable truth. The loudest sound in her story is the one we never heard. Elena Grace Ward was born on June 14, 1994, in Greenville, South Carolina. She was the middle child in a family of 3, a daughter to Margaret Ward and younger sister to Daniel. She carried both the warmth of a peacemaker and the determination of someone who never gave up on people. Margaret described her as a firework, bright, dazzling, impossible not to notice, even in a crowded room. From the start, Elena had a gift. While other children scribbled with crayons, she sketched lifelike portraits of her pets, capturing tiny details, the curve of a paw, the glint of light in an eye that seemed far beyond her years. She was more than just an artist. She was the kind of person who gave her time freely. At 12, Elena began volunteering at the community center, tutoring children who struggled with reading. By high school, she was organizing fundraisers for the local shelter. Her best friend, Naomi Ellis, said she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She genuinely cared. If you were in a room with her, you felt like you mattered. There is unto the day. She had quirks that made her unforgettable. She collected postcards from every trip, even short ones. She had a love for rainy afternoons, insisting that the sound of rain helped her focus. She bought houseplants she couldn't keep alive, yet she kept trying anyway. These little details formed a picture of a young woman full of kindness, humor, and determination. In 2012, Elena graduated high school and went on to study graphic design at the University of South Carolina, with a minor in psychology. It was a natural choice, combining her creativity with her love of understanding people. She thrived in college, balancing long nights in the design lab with volunteer shifts at the animal shelter. She dreamed of one day opening her own design studio, creating art that told stories and connected people. By 2018, Elena was 24 and working at a boutique marketing agency in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was small, but she loved it. Her colleagues described her as the bright spot in the office. She was reliable, thoughtful, and always willing to lend a hand when deadlines loomed. For the first time, she was independent, building the life she'd always imagined. But that October, everything changed. On October 27, 2018, Elena attended a Halloween party. Naomi had convinced her to go, telling her she needed a break from work. Elena arrived in a simple 1920s flapper costume, her smile modest but genuine. That's where she met Damian Cross. He was 29, tall, broad-shouldered, and immediately noticeable. Charismatic, confident, practiced. He struck up a conversation with her that night, asking about her art, laughing at her jokes, offering to walk her to her car. By Monday morning, she had a message from him. "Can't stop thinking about you." Within weeks, they were inseparable. Damian seemed like everything Elena had been waiting for. He sent her good morning texts before her alarm even went off. He brought flowers to her desk. He cooked her dinner and remembered her favorite coffee order. Naomi said she had this glow. She thought she'd finally found the one. But those first few months were only a mask. Behind Damian's charm was something far more dangerous. At first, the signs were small. Damian texted constantly when she was out with friends. He wanted to know who she was with, when she'd be home. He framed it as care, as protection. Elena laughed it off, telling Naomi, "He just worries. It's kind of sweet." But Naomi wasn't convinced. Protective was one thing, possessive was another. By early 2019, Damian's behavior grew more controlling. He criticized her outfits, suggesting she change into something less revealing. He discouraged her from seeing certain friends. He began showing up at her workplace without warning, always watching. To outsiders, it looked like devotion. To Elena, it began to feel like surveillance. Still, she stayed. Victims often do, not out of weakness, but out of hope. Hope that the good moments mean more than the bad. Hope that the person they love will change. Elena convinced herself that Damian's jealousy came from insecurity, not danger. She thought she could help him, fix him, reassure him. The arguments became frequent. Neighbors recalled muffled shouting through the thin apartment walls. One said it felt like walking on eggshells, even from the outside. By summer, Elena seemed quieter. She canceled plans with Naomi, made excuses, and when she did show up, she was distracted. Her phone rarely left her hand, Damian's messages lighting up her screen. In September, Margaret noticed faint bruises on her daughter's arm at a family dinner. Elena brushed it off, saying she had bumped into a cabinet. Margaret didn't believe her, but when she pressed, Elena snapped. "It's nothing," she said. "You're overthinking." Like so many mothers in her position, Margaret faced a painful choice: push harder or risk her daughter pulling away further. To the outside world, Elena and Damian's relationship looked picture perfect. Social media showed weekend trips, smiling selfies, handwritten notes captioned with hearts. But those curated images hid a reality filled with fear. That reality reached its breaking point on November 12, 2019. Elena left work around 7:15 p.m. after finishing a design project. She stopped at the grocery store, then carried her bags back into the apartment she shared with Damian. Surveillance footage showed her smiling politely at a neighbor in the lobby. At 7:46, she texted Naomi, "He's mad again. I'll call you later." It was the last message she ever sent. At 8:13 p.m., a neighbor upstairs reported hearing a loud crash, followed by heavy thuds. Then, silence. No cries for help, no desperate pounding, just silence. The next morning, Elena didn't show up for work. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. Naomi drove to the apartment around noon, knocking until Damian finally opened the door. He looked disheveled, irritated. He claimed Elena had left after an argument and hadn't come back. Naomi later told police the air in the apartment felt heavy, suffocating, as if something terrible had already happened. By that evening, Margaret filed a missing persons report. Elena's car was still in the lot. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and the surveillance cameras showed no record of her leaving. Detectives immediately treated the case as suspicious. Forensic teams searched the apartment. They found stains on a pillow in the bedroom. Blood. They found a section of carpet near the couch scrubbed with cleaning solution. Someone had tried to erase what happened. Damian's story kept changing. First, he said Elena left around 8, then 9:30. He contradicted himself about whether she had taken her phone. His inconsistencies mounted, and detectives dug deeper. That's when they uncovered his past. Damian had 2 restraining orders filed by former partners. Both women described him the same way: charming at first, obsessive, and terrifying later. One ex moved out of state after he repeatedly showed up at her workplace. None of the cases had led to charges, but together, they revealed a chilling pattern. On November 16, police seized Damian's phone and laptop. Forensic analysis revealed dozens of disturbing searches. How long police wait before declaring someone missing? How to hide bruises? How long does it take to get a warrant? He had been planning, preparing. On November 20, investigators brought in a cadaver dog. It alerted near the trunk of Damian's car. Inside, wrapped in a blanket, were traces of Elena's blood. Her body was never found, but the evidence was damning. Damian was arrested on suspicion of murder. The trial began, On May 2021, prosecutors presented the blood evidence, the cleaned carpet, the internet searches, and the testimonies of former partners. They argued that Elena had likely tried to leave, and Damian's rage turned lethal. The defense insisted the case was circumstantial. They repeated the phrase, "no body, no murder," telling the jury there was no proof Elena was dead, only that she was missing. But the prosecution countered with cell phone records showing Damian's phone was off for several crucial hours that night. GPS data placed his car near a wooded area outside Charlotte around midnight. The circumstantial web was tight. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 2 days. On June 3, 2021, Damian Cross was found guilty of second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison. For Elena's family, the verdict was both relief and heartbreak. Justice, in a sense, had been served, but it did not bring her back. Margaret stood outside the courthouse, her voice breaking as she said, "We will never stop missing her, but we will not let her story end here." In the months that followed, Margaret and Naomi launched the Elena Ward Foundation, dedicated to raising awareness about intimate partner violence and coercive control. They worked with shelters, funded educational programs in schools, and lobbied for stronger protections. Each year, on June 14, Elena's birthday, they hold a candlelight vigil. Friends, family, and strangers gather, lighting candles, releasing lanterns, and speaking her name so it will never fade into silence. Elena's story is a painful reminder that abuse often hides in plain sight. What looks like love can be control. What feels like devotion can turn into obsession. And what starts as romance can end in violence. She will be remembered not for the silence of her last moments, but for the light she brought into every life she touched. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, know that help is available. You are not alone. And if Elena's story teaches us anything, it is this: listen for the silences. Pay attention to the red flags. Don't dismiss the small signs that can grow into tragedy, because sometimes the most haunting part of a story is not the scream we hear, but the one we never do.